In 2017, McGill's medical school ran into trouble with the accreditors. Well, why? Well, this is from CBC News, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, which is Canada's state-run media, right? An appalling organization, which was once also a reasonably reliable institution. So McGill's medical school was put on probation by its accrediting body. Well, why? Progress is minimal and below average for Canadian medical schools when it comes to the recruitment of Indigenous students. It also notes that Black and Filipino people are underrepresented in relationship to Montreal census data. Low parental income and education levels are underrepresented as well. And McGill was cited for lack of progress recruiting students from rural backgrounds. McGill's Dean of Medicine promised to improve his faculty's diversity. Well, that was his mistake. Another coward, craven, sad, ideologically captured, weak, spineless, lack of leadership. Okay, and the letter from the accrediting agency continues. It is unclear what actions have been taken to improve diversity in leadership, and little progress is reported in improving levels of participation by women and Aboriginals in leadership positions. Okay, so this is what you have to understand, although perhaps you don't want to. The competition for qualified so-called minorities is insanely intense. Now, are the universities supposed to hire people who can't do the job? Well, obviously, as long as they fit the right bloody racial category, sex proclivity category, get those LGBT2 types in there, whatever the hell that has to do with scholarship and teaching. The people don't exist. The people don't exist. Do you understand that? You have to radically lower your criteria in order to meet the mandates, in which case your quality will radically and permanently dip. And if you're training physicians or maybe air traffic controllers, there's another group to think about. Maybe you don't do that, eh? Maybe you would select people for how well they do on the MCAT, right? Or on the SAT. And if you can't find people who do in the top 5%, if you're a great university, then you don't take them. Because if you do, they hire people who are even worse, and then you're screwed. Really, then your institution collapses. And that happens very quickly. How many places are there in the world with great university and professional institutions? Okay? How many do you think? There are 24 free Western democracies in the world out of 200 countries. So that's how rare it is. And it took hundreds of years to build those institutions, and they can be destroyed at a moment's notice. And that's what's happened. So McGill, in an interview with CBC, remember this is from 2017, Dean of Medicine David Eidelman said, a number of measures have been put in place to try to recruit more minorities. The university has hired a director specifically charged with improving diversity. There's a new Indigenous health program targeting students from Indigenous communities. McGill, moreover, is trying to improve rural recruitment with its Gatineau campus. Eidelman said all medical programs struggle with recruiting minorities. It's hard. Why? Because in order to get into medical school, you need to have very high marks. And then he does this, then he does this. In general, it's easier to get really high marks when you come from a privileged background. Yeah, well, you know what? It's not that goddamn easy, you know? And the marks either mean something or they don't. And if marks don't mean anything, then why the hell do we have universities? So this statement from Eidelman, it sums up the pathology of the universities and their craven administrators in a nutshell. It's hard because in order to get into medical school, you need to have very high marks. Well, maybe that's because we want smart doctors, eh? It's a possibility. And in general, it's easier to get really high marks when you come from a privileged background. Yeah, I don't think it's that easy, you son of a bitch. The University Medical School, the oldest in Canada, was put on probation in 2015, a major blow to McGill's reputation. It risked losing its accreditation after an inspection found the undergraduate medical education failed to meet 24 of 132 required standards. Well, there you go. So that was 2015. So let's go to 2025, shall we? April 25th. For the second time in a row, McGill University's flagship program in medicine, the best medical school in Canada, has been put on probation by Canadian accreditation authorities for another 24 glaring deficiencies, same as in 2015. You can bet McGill bent itself backwards, hiring all the right lefties to run their bloody diversity programs and didn't make a bit of progress. Why? How about because it's impossible? How about that? Yeah, well, it's not impossible if you're an idiot accreditor and you think you can make things happen in complex institutions by waving your magic fairy wand. And this is the Gazette. Even as McGill moves to address these shortcomings, it is closing its Social Accountability and Community Engagement Office, which was set up after McGill's medical program was first placed on probation in 2015 to address DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Gazette has learned. This shows you the state of newspaper journalists as well. The 3 individuals who ran that DEI office in the medical faculty, all of whom are members of racialized minorities, are being replaced by a single person who does not come from such a minority background and who will be overseeing diversity initiatives as Vice Dean of Education and Community Engagement. If you don't think that's funny, you've got no sense of humor. It's damn black humor, though. McGill's decision to close its dedicated DEI office occurred right after accreditors wrapped up their interviews and visits to the university in January. Just think about that. McGill was put on notice that unless they advanced their DEI programs, they were going to lose their bloody accreditation. That meant they wouldn't have a medical school. And the consequence of that 10 years later was that they hadn't made a bit of progress, and everything they did failed so utterly cataclysmically on the DEI front that they actually closed their office. You think about what kind of failure that indicates, right, in the face of this absolute impossibility. Technically, McGill's marquee medical program is still accredited despite its probationary status. But the news could potentially affect McGill's #1 ranking of all medical schools in the country by Maclean's magazine in Canada. That's kind of like Time used to be in its next annual survey. So, what can I say? Well, here's something else that's happened. And Trump actually moved to do something about this with an executive order earlier this month. The accreditation agencies that determine whether the professionals who serve you are competent have become more corrupted even than the universities. So, with Peterson Academy, we're wrestling with the issue of accreditation because our courses aren't transferable to universities. But increasingly, corporations don't give a damn if you have a university degree, and no wonder. And it might even be the fact that being accredited now is an indicator that you're ideologically corrupt, because in order to become accredited, you have to follow all the accreditation dictums, and they're all the same dictums that destroyed the universities. So what we're hoping with our initiative is to go direct to corporations and to say, we can screen candidates for you for merit, and we won't educate them to be narcissistic, woke troublemakers who think that the way you improve the world is by protesting, which is essentially, definitely, what they're taught in university. Leslie Fellows is Dean of Medicine, by the way. Fellows insisted, however, that McGill has made tremendous progress since it's met with its medical curriculum since 2015. Yeah, I bet that's progress. When you dig down below the kind of headline on the outcome, you can understand better the progress that we have, in fact, made over the last 10 years. Yeah, progress. All right. According to the New York Times, Trump's at war with Harvard. But the New York Times is capable of lying 3 times in a single sentence that only contains 3 hypothetical facts. So it lies all the time. This is not a war between the world's best university, Harvard, and MAGA Trump. First of all, it's not the best university in the world anymore. I don't know what might be the best university in the world anymore. It's hard to say. Oxford's pretty shaky. Cambridge is pretty shaky. Columbia, less said about Columbia, the better. You can tell Harvard's not the best university anymore because people aren't applying to it. And donors have decreased the degree to which they're willing to support it. And there's going to be more of that along the way. For a long time, one of the highlights of my life was the fact that I had taught at Harvard, that I was selected on the basis of my merit for a position there. And now, it's not something I bring up. I never did bring it up, except when it was appropriate. But I'm much less likely to do it now, as I'm less likely to presume that my status as a PhD is a meritorious designation. And that's a sad thing. I loved working at Harvard. I thought McGill was great. And the University of Toronto served me pretty well for about 15 years. I say none of this with any pleasure. And I'm sorry also for a fair bit of irritation, but it's so frustrating to see this. It's so appalling. It's so sickening. It's such a betrayal of trust. I saw nothing but cowardice from my faculty compatriots, from the administration, from the research. I really expected better from researchers and, say, my compatriot psychologists, professionals. We're so cowardly. A few of us could have band together at any time and brought all this nonsense to a stop. 100 would have done it, or the 10 that so famously would have stopped God from destroying Sodom and Gomorrah. It would have just taken a very few people, and they didn't show up. And so whatever Harvard gets from the Trump administration is a small fragment of what they deserve. And I would say that is true no matter how